Yes, show me the blood.
Yeah, see? Oh, man.
Show me the spilled guts.
I can't handle that stuff. It ruins my week, okay? I don't want to hear about these things. There's some really... I just don't... Let's not even go there. Hey, everyone. I'm Studio Steve, and I'm here with the beautiful Veronica.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pod Sound School.
So, as you know, we're always asking our podskis, and we're reaching out to people and asking to get as much feedback or questions about anything that people are struggling with. And we were hit up by one of our podskis who is really on the fence about getting into podcasting. And what she's most concerned about is the time involved, or the time that it will take to get into podcasting. And that's actually one of the three main concerns that people have, is either the time it takes, the money involved, or the learning curve. So Veronica and I thought that we would attempt to answer her question and do an episode today about how much time it takes on a weekly basis to create your podcast. And that's pretty difficult to find out because there's such a disparity depending on the type of podcast.
Depends, yes.
Yeah, it's going to be really crazy. And so to answer that question, we reached out and we got a lot of... We did a poll here on Twitter, and we also did a poll. Veronica did a poll on Instagram.
Yes, I did.
And her poll...
I wasn't as successful as you were.
No, I don't know what's going on with those Instagram story polls. But
I got 10 people, though.
Yeah, she got 10 people, and I got like 83 people or something.
Yes.
So the results of the poll here, we've got 93 podskis voted about how many hours it takes each week to produce one podcast episode. And it's pretty crazy. You'd see that most people are in the 4 to 6 hours a week range, which I found to be pretty surprising. I thought it would take a little longer than that. Mm-hmm. So today, how are we going to organize?
So the way we're going to present this information to you is that we decided to use roles, because that's an easy way to understand from the beginning to the end what it takes to produce a podcast episode and how many hours it takes on each stage. So, and it's going to be fun because we're going to be talking about the researcher and the writer and the editor, and we're going to be talking about the performer and the talent. And we're going to be talking about the social media specialist and what each of these roles, what they entail.
And for the sake of this conversation, we're going to assume that you're already efficient at these roles. You know, so if you are a researcher and a writer, then you're already really good at researching and writing. The same if for a talent and a performer, you're already good in front of a microphone. You're already good doing that.
Yes.
If you need education on that, then you have to bake that time into it as well.
That will take, some additional time for you to get caught up with the learning curve.
Yes.
But we're assuming that you are good to go in all these stages.
But before we get into it, we wanted to remind you a way that you can help the Pod Sound School grow.
Yes.
And that's by our Patreon account.
Yeah, if you want to support the Pod Sound School, if you want to support what we do, you can go on patreon.com. There's links for Patreon everywhere.
Yeah.
There's going to be one on this episode.
On this episode, and
you can
also go to...
you can go and sign up for a membership. That will help us so we can keep producing more content, that we keep producing more podcast episodes, more YouTube videos. So as a reward for you signing up, you're going to have access to our behind the scenes, which is, they're very interesting. We have very interesting lives, and we have a very interesting dynamic and a way that we work together, and a way that we produce all our videos and the different content we put on social media, and
it's fun.
It's fun. So as a reward for you signing up, you'll get access to the behind the scenes.
Yeah. So with that, let's jump into the episode. The first role that we're going to talk about is the researcher and the writer.
Yes. For that role, depending on the subject, really, it can take between an hour or less than an hour or a full day of work. Some of the podcasts that have seasons, then they take an entire, month, 2 months to do the research, and then they put the podcast together. So it depends on what kind of subject you cover, with your podcast, what kind of expertise you have. If you're an expert in the field, then you may not have to devote so many hours into research because you already know your stuff.
Yeah, you can just chat about your stuff.
You can just chat about your stuff. Same thing if you're repurposing your blog, or if you're repurposing the book that you just published into podcast episodes, then the material is already there and you don't have to do as much research.
Yeah, so the main concerns are like, is it going to be scripted? Is it going to be unscripted? And then it's just so dependent on the format of the show.
Sometimes there's no research at all.
A lot of times co-hosted shows too, they'll research together and then they share each other's findings, or they take turns every other episode researching. So there's lots of tips. I know that as a researcher yourself, you have some tips for researching, making saving time with the research process.
The thing that you can do to save time when you are research, have the main goal or the main question that you want to answer on that episode, have it written on a post how do you call those things? They're paper and they stick.
A Post-it note.
A Post-it note.
Yes, a Post-it note.
Yeah, we're going modern family here. Or on a board or on a piece of paper, so you're reminded of what you're researching, because what happens when you are doing research is that you tend to go the rabbit hole. And that you find another interesting thing and another interesting thing. So, and that research that should take you half an hour, 45 minutes, it takes you 2 hours because you went down the rabbit hole and you forgot what you were researching. So,
and that can be fun. But when you're talking about efficiency and keeping your podcast going, you know, I think those are some of the things that are learned as you go about it too. Like, so that's why as you become an efficient researcher,
and there's just so many resources out there. So make sure that you check your sources. Try not to go with the first thing that pops out on Google search.
Yeah, and then that leads you to your tip. I think you're going to talk about writing, whereas, you know, just cite your sources instead of trying to...
Yeah, so instead of reinvent the wheel, instead of like trying to come up with new things, you can like find an interesting article or an interesting blog post, and you can cite that source in your podcast. You can say, you know, according to the Entrepreneur magazine. So those are things that you can do, and that will speed up your research and writing. Also having templates. And then another thing that I think it's important, because I love writing, but writing doesn't come easy for me at a certain time of the day. So I'm a morning writer. If you feel like you're a morning writer, then you should schedule your writing in the mornings.
Yeah.
Because it's so frustrating to just sit down in front of the computer and stare to the screen and nothing comes out. And so just learn when's the appropriate time for you.
Yeah, and then just looking at some of the polls and the responses we got from people in our own experience, it seems like the average is about 1 to 3 hours a week on writing. But if you're a heavily researched show, if you're an interview podcast even, you're going to spend a lot more time than that probably writing. But a good average, so to answer our Podski's question, with writing, you need about 1 hour to 3 hours for research and writing. Now let's move on to
the performer.
The performer, yes.
Now, the performer, like I said, that's just getting in front of the microphone. That's just doing it in front of the microphone. And things, again, this takes a lot of practice. Veronica and me too, I've been taking a long time, but I had some podcasting experiences before Veronica.
Yeah.
And she has just been killing it with, you know, English being her second language.
Yes. But, you know, we've seen the difference between when Studio Steve records his podcast episodes that when I'm involved. When I'm involved, we know that we have to add more time to recording because I struggle with pronunciation of certain words or because I don't have the experience that he has with the microphone, is because I get intimidated.
Yeah.
And I get frustrated. And
so to get up to speed there, I think some tips are just to make some practice recordings.
Yes.
That's great and everything else. But like we said, the disclaimer at the beginning, we're assuming that you're already good at performing.
And we're
trying to figure out how long it takes each week to just record the podcast. Usually this is the quickest part because you've done the research. Some good tips here are to drink a lot of water, sip water throughout it, read your script out loud before or rehearse before. If you can make this process go quicker, if you can make this process happen with less hiccups and you have it rehearsed and you and your co-host are really good at doing it, then that's going to require
you're
a lot
well
less
rested,
editing.
Hydrated, and you're prepared.
Yeah,
those three things.
That makes the whole thing go a lot quicker.
I had a lot of saliva spitting everywhere. I know.
And then
I apologize for that.
Yeah, so that the performing part of it takes 1 to 2 hours on average. The big exception here would be audio dramas. Obviously, that's a lot of acting. That's a lot of recording. The other exception would be...
That sounds like fun. We should do.
I know. I really want to do an audio
me too.
drama.
We should do one.
That would be amazing.
Like a Colombian soap opera.
Ooh, yes.
Yes. Mauricio and Natalia.
Mauricio. Yo soy Mauricio. Marrano. Okay, so that's great. Mauricio es perdido.
Okay, that's enough. Spanish.
So this is good, and you can really get into... audio dramas are a big exception. The other exception would be like, an NPR-style show where they send people off weeks in advance doing this kind of things, and they gather lots of interviews, an interview-style show. But if you're just doing a single interview, that can go pretty quick, too.
Yes.
You just want to keep somebody on the line for half an hour. So the performing part is about an hour to 2 hours on average. So let's move on. The next role is the editor.
Okay.
This varies a ton. This varies as much as writing and research probably. And this just has to do with the type of show that you have. But I think, I would argue that at least a very minimal amount of editing is always recommended and always important. Just to cut out some of the staggering, just to cut out a little bit of the ums. That's my favorite thing to do is cut out all of the ums.
Yes.
It makes you sound so much more intelligent.
Yes.
And not only that,
I love that.
It provides for just a better listening experience.
It does,
at least for me. But that also changes by audience too. Some people just like to hear the raw, uncut, humble version of people.
You wouldn't like to hear mine on my raw recordings.
I like it a lot. It's a joy that I get to edit your voice because sometimes I'll just grab your little flubs and repeat them over and over and over again. I'm like, it's wonderful. So the average that people spend according to our polls on this was about 1 to 4 hours in editing. That's an average. And that's about my average too. And little tricks you can do to get this process going faster is to make templates. You can make templates in pretty much most DAWs that you would be using. Stay organized. That's really important. And have a folder where you have all your assets in or all of your digital audio files. So like your intro piece, or if there's little sound effects that you always like to use or things like that, just have those ready to drop into your session really quick. So things like that make it a lot easier, but 1 to 4 hours.
And he claims that he's very organized that way.
I am very organized that way. Okay, now maybe on my laptop there's the files all over the place, but in this guy over here, I am a shining beacon of organization. Okay. So after the editor, we're also going to assume that editor sends the file to the host, and now it's live on iTunes. Now it comes down to
the social media specialist.
Yes, the social media specialist.
So this varies a lot too. The same disclaimer here, we're assuming that you're already really good at social media. If you don't know anything about Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, then you're going to need to bake in time at the beginning of your podcast to learn all of that. But how much it takes per week, that's what we're getting at here.
And we have a lot of resources on our YouTube channel that you can make use of.
Oh yeah, we're just, and that's actually our topic of our.
We have 3 videos,
four videos up there right now. Yeah, 2 Twitter and 2 Instagrams.
2 Twitter and 2 Instagrams.
And before we move on from social media on YouTube, we're going to do another Instagram video and another Twitter video.
Another Twitter
and the next
video.
Twitter video is going to be
it's
entirely
gonna be a total
animated.
of 6 videos that will help you optimize your Instagram and Twitter accounts. It will help you.
And that's because that's what we have been doing research on and that we've become specialists in. So that's what we feel comfortable teaching. We're still learning Facebook.
Learning.
In the future, when we're better at Facebook and Facebook groups and things like that, we'll be helping people to get better at that too. So, and you can come join us at our Facebook group, Podcasting for Bosses, and help us get better at Facebooking.
Yes.
So, a social media specialist. So this varies, and the average we got from people was about 2 to 10 hours a week was the average that we got from people, and that's I think pretty realistic.
Yes.
A lot of people with they say they only do about an hour a week of social media, or when they said that it only takes them a few hours per week for episode. I'm not sure if they really baked in the time for social media.
Yeah, I don't think so. And social media, we've been talking a lot about social media on our different platforms, and
it just takes
time. It takes time because you have to create content for your different social media platforms. You have to create captions and you have to create images. And then when you have posted your content, then you have to engage and you have to look for followers and look for your community and just keep being very active on social media.
Yeah, and I think, podcasting...
And that takes time.
So if you're spending 3 hours in the writing, the recording, and the editing of your podcast, you really ought to spend another 3.
Another 3 hours
at
promoting that piece of art.
Yeah, and it's not even about just promotion, as we've been getting into too. It's also about creating little micro pieces of content.
Yes.
Because what you find as you become a podcaster is that you also are a content creator. You're creating content in an internet medium. And so as you want to start growing your audience, what you fall down into is this rabbit hole of content repurposing, which is people want to be entertained on different platforms. So they want to see you on Twitter and they want to stay on Twitter a lot of times, or they want to see you on Instagram and they want to stay on Instagram. So you're creating different content like audiograms, images.
Yes. So you create all of that fun stuff for your different social media platforms. It's time consuming. It's fun.
Okay, so finally to finish up the roles, we've really talked about the 4 main roles or the 4 main points, which is research and writing, performing or being the talent, and then the editor, editing your shows, and then promoting your shows, getting your shows out there and finding an audience.
The social media strategy.
Now, if you're a one-woman show, like the person who hit us up and wanted us, inspired us to do this episode.
For our magicians out there.
Yeah, for
doing it all.
The do-it-allers. For the magicians. Then how much time a week? If you're already efficient at all 4 of these roles, how many hours is it going to take you a week, one woman show, to do your own podcast? It takes, on average, we found from our polls, 5 to 19 hours a week, which means if you're thinking about starting a podcast on your own, if you're thinking about just doing a one-woman show, then you're going to have to bake in at least 5 hours a week. And that is very minimal. That would have to be a very well-optimized and there are tips to maybe trimming it down.
Yeah, there are things that you can do, and then I'm sure there's many more out there, but the ones that we thought that you can start doing right now, or that you can have in mind when you start producing your podcast, are in the research stage. This concept of, I call it branching out. I don't know if that's the proper term, but is you start from the center, and I'm going to use the example of baking a cake. So you do research as far as baking a cake and you start branching out. Then you do research about how to make cupcakes. So you're going to have that research about baking a cake and then research about making a cupcake. And then what that makes is that you are going to become or turn into an expert of how to bake different cakes. And every time you produce a podcast episode, then you're going to have that bank of knowledge and information. And that way you don't have to go back and do more research. You have it all centralized and organized, and you can map out, you can do make a diagram with the different things that you want to research and that you want to cover.
Yeah,
that it's been very helpful for me when I do my research.
And then with writing, I think a really good tip that you could use is to separate one long episode into little small episodes.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love this tip. Is so important because we've been listening to Naval, right?
Yeah,
To his podcast. And his episodes are like 6 minutes.
Of one long interview that the guy did.
3 minutes.
It
and
easily-
it's a one long interview, but because what he says is so important, you don't want to miss out. And I appreciate that they are making those episodes in that format.
Yeah, so what if-
so they're like little bits and pieces of valuable information. Just think about if that's the format that you can use for your podcast.
Yeah, and then also when you're thinking about that gets into performing and recording, and that's like batch recording. And you hear so many people when they're talking about workflow, they talk about batch recording your episodes, and that's what a lot of people do to save time. Well, you take 100 minutes, and they're really good minutes that you've edited, that you've recorded, that you've researched, and you cut those into 10, then you've got 10
and you already
weeks.
have your templates.
Yeah, you have your templates and everything else.
Your intro, your outros.
intros and your outros. Then you have 10 episodes. So you have 10 weeks of episodes out of 100 minutes. Now, that being said, one of the beautiful things about podcasting is that it is a longer format platform. So you do find audience members who love to have an hour and a half episodes. And that's why you see a lot of them. But smaller episodes perform really well. The sweet spot for an episode is 22 minutes, I think.
Yeah, and bottom line is what your audience wants from you. So, it's not what I say, it's not what Steven says, it's what your audience
Your niche wants.
Yeah, your niche audience.
Yeah, so, and that, again, is all dependent on the type of podcast you're doing and who your niche is.
Yeah.
And who you're creating your podcast
I can
for.
listen to a podcast longer than 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts.
Yeah, but your favorite kind of podcast are
but
true
that is just me
crime.
because I'm always on the run. I'm always busy. But yeah, if it's a true crime episode, yeah, I'm there 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yes, show me the blood.
Yeah, see? Oh, man.
Show me the spilled guts.
I can't handle that stuff. It ruins my week, okay? I don't want to hear about these things. There's some really... I just don't... Let's not even go there. Okay, and then
I like my blood.
Another tip you can do for trimming it down to that 5 hours instead of the 19 hours a week is to get more people involved if it's a one-woman show. If you can budget out for it, outsource. Can you budget in a couple $100 for a social media person?
I would start with social media. Oh.
Have somebody help you with your social media.
Or editing.
Yeah. Or find a co-host. Find somebody who's going to come on, wants to partner up with you, and then split up the social media. Like Veronica and I do. Somebody does Twitter, somebody does Instagram. That way you can specialize in something. Or maybe somebody edits and does all the editing while somebody's doing all the social media.
Yeah, that will save you a lot of time.
That's what we got from most of the comments and people that we and podcasters we talk about. Everybody's doing that, and that's about it. We had 93 podskis that voted and took part in our polls, all to help one person that asked us to do this episode for her to find out about how long it takes each week. So Veronica's going to start by talking about...
we had for Instagram, we had 16 people. 15 people because I included myself on that.
Yep.
And we have Nothing Canada.
Oh, Nothing Ever Happens in Canada.
Yes, Nothing Ever Happens in Canada. We have our friends from Crime Salad Podcast.
Oh, Crime Salad Podcast.
We have our friend Dan from Growing the Future Podcast.
Sweet, Growing the Future.
We had our client Erin Ramsey.
Oh, okay,
We're working on Erin's.
We're working on her podcast that's coming out. That's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's so good. We have Caroline. I don't know what her podcast name is. We have Living Redeem Matt.
Living Redeemed Matt.
That's his name, Matt.
Oh, okay.
But the podcast is Living Redeemed.
Cool.
This is Shagnik and Justin Keeney and In the Jar Podcast.
In the Jar Podcast. So those were the participants on...
Thank you. You took the time to get that little finger and push and tap on it. Thank you. Thank you for taking that little finger.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to just read a few of the comments here. These were participants in the polls. I'm obviously not going to read the 80 different podcasts that participated in the polls, but I thought these comments were pretty cool. The podcast, they're friends of ours, and they've participated in our freebie Really cool. They said, we record an episode 1 to 2 hours. I spend about 2 hours editing, send it to my host, then sporadically share on social media. See, and that's the thing.
So that's about like 5 hours?
That's about 5 hours.
5, 6 hours? Okay.
5 or 6 hours a week. Hold My Popcorn podcast. I do the editing and promotion and hosting, including watching the movie. I probably spend 10 to 12 hours per week on average as well. It used to be more when I first started out. Yeah, when you first start out.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Like, the more you do it, the quicker you get at all these stages.
And then Cinemondo podcast. She said, we spend about 4 hours recording a couple of episodes. So they do some batch recording. And that's also good for scheduling, batch recording. And then she says, one of our hosts does the editing and sound sweetening. I do most of the social media and content with an assist from the other host. And this is probably the most time-consuming part.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Yes, it is.
The social media for us is the most time-consuming part. And then overall, at least an hour or two per day on that. So 10 hours per week average.
Yeah, on social media.
And so they cut time and save time by batch recording their episodes. And so about on average, but some weeks...
That's a very smart way to
And they
do
also
it.
have to watch the movies too. So,
yes.
And I don't know if that was...
And there's this all these different tools that you can use to automate your social media.
Oh yeah, social media automation.
Automation
like that.
is key, and don't we have a video about automation? We have a video that talks about automation for Instagram and Twitter.
And for Twitter, yeah.
So get familiar with those. That will save you a lot of time.
Yeah. So here's the Casual Birder podcast. I want to go listen to it.
Me too.
It sounds really cool. And he said that he checked out our show too.
Great.
So he was introduced to us from this poll. He says, probably about 15 hours a week. Editing-wise, interviews carried out in the field take longest. Solo episodes are quickest. I spend about 3 hours a week promoting my show and engaging with communities of potential listeners. So he's doing 3 hours a week on social media. That was right in our average range that most people are spending. I think that's a good amount. And then No Meh Movies podcast.
No meh.
I love it. But I don't know. Do you like, podcast better or No Meh Movies podcast?
It's like meh?
No meh.
Oh, meh.
Like meh.
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 So
they don't
why
want
did you
any
say,
meh.
Why did you say no meh?
Did I say no meh?
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't say it right.
It's meh.
Oh, it's meh.
Yeah?
Okay. Well, okay. Well, I don't know. Oh, we're not seeing Veronica's mehs here. I just had it on my face.
What?
We got to see some of those mehs. So wait, how would you say it? No meh.
No meh.
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 I think I'd be more like meh. Meh.
Meh.
I think my meh was good. Now, I don't know what my first... Okay,
I
whatever.
love that name. No meh.
No meh. Okay, so the No Meh Movie podcast said it's the editing and the actual watching of the movies, of course, for our show. I'm surprised how many podcasts I listened to where just a little bit of time and editing could clean up so much stuff.
No meh. Meh. You are so right.
So right. Just
Spend
clean up
some
a couple.
time editing your podcast.
Bake that
Just
into
the
it.
same way you spend time making yourself handsome or beautiful on a Saturday night to go see your friends or to go see your significant other or to go out on a dinner. Just take some time
just
to
groom it a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's worth
make
the time.
it look sexy.
And I think a lot of the I can see why you talk for an hour and a half and then it's like,
yeah.
so I have to listen
what do I
through
do
the
with
whole
this?
hour and a half.
That's why you have to keep it short.
Yeah, that's why keeping it short is a little better. Keeping it organized is going to make editing more of a possibility. But it's, Okay, here's another one. Capes on the Couch. An hour to write, roughly an hour to record, 2 hours to edit, and then the promotion time varies. But it's quite a bit of time on Twitter and Facebook. And then one thing I liked throughout our conversation, I was like, yeah, social media takes forever. He wrote back, yeah, well, when every third tweet is, hey, I need a podcast recommendation, and every podcast with an alert on that question pounces on the helpless person like a Zerg rush. What can you do? It's true. Every third tweet is podcast recommendations, please. I'm wondering if those are even real, if people are just messing with podcasters. But
that would be mean.
Yeah. No, and a lot of people, that's their marketing strategy on Twitter, too, is just to always look out for those and have an alert on those and add your podcast to that. People are pretty successful with that. And then finally, Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. Wonderful podcast. She says, it takes a while! ! I do an interview show So in the same week, I can be preparing for and recording one episode, editing a second episode, writing show notes and scheduling a third episode to post, and promoting a fourth episode on social media.
Ooh, that's intense.
Yeah. So it takes a while. That's about it for this episode. So,
yes. Bye.
Bye, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
At the Pod Show.